Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
So, want to talk about visualization, and this will take us, well, there are so many options for visualization. So as we go through, ask whatever questions occur to you. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things. First of all, what are the different types of visualization that we have? We have what we call a quick chart, and a quick chart is exactly that. It's a quick way to get a little bit of information from one or more data sources. And then we have reports. The difference is a report persists. So we're going to store the report definition, and then we can display it again and again, right? A report is a combination of one or more charts. And we need to start at the base chart, create that, create as many as we need, and then combine them to create a template. And then from the template, we assign the data source and it becomes a report. And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. And once we have the report, there's a lot of different options that are available to us. So that is what we're going to look at. Now, my background is more IT. So I lean towards the Linux and Windows operating system connections, but we're also going to work with the other types of connections so that you can see the different types of metrics that we're receiving from the different data sources. So let's start with quick charts. In the top right corner of EDM, we have these icons, and we'll take a look at all of them. But the green one is an area chart, and this is the quick charts access mechanism. So when you click the quick chart icon, we're going to start from scratch, right? We have an idea what we might want to look at, and we looked before at all of the different data sources that are available to us. In the quick chart window, we have to do a couple of things first, which is to choose where we want to get the data, right? So what data source are we going to use? You saw that we had several packing line connections, and we also had some that were monitoring the Linux server where EDM is installed. So let's look at a couple of different ones, and I'll show you that it works the same in terms of creating the chart. So I selected the Linux system, and as soon as I select the data source itself, EDM gives me a couple of things. First of all, he tells me what the time range is for the data for this connection. And you remember we had 3 different settings. We had our live data. So we're getting data here every 20 seconds. We had our 10-minute summary and our 30-minute summary. So you can see how much data we have in each of those data repositories. In this case, we were keeping 14 days of data at the live data at the 20-second interval, and then a little bit more at each of the other historical intervals. But what that means is we can use a lot of our different time definitions. We said that last hour was our default time definition, and you can see all of those time definitions that were in the list before are displayed here. Now, custom is always at the bottom as an option. So if one of the options that is there doesn't work for me, I can always specify a set begin time and end time. but we're going to leave it just at last hour. Okay. Now, once I had selected my data source, I now get the list of all of the available metrics. And you can see this is quite a lengthy list for an operating system instance. So I have information about memory, I have information about CPU, etc. So some of the metrics will have these brackets on the side. So if I say CPU percent system and it has the brackets on the side, that means that there are subscripts, right? Because there are multiple CPUs on this machine. If you see a subscript that's called global or total, that just means the average of all of them. And then I have to add that to my chart. Once you have at least one metric selected, you can display the chart. So if we go up to the top, I'll say show chart, and EDM is going to actually display the chart for me. So CPU utilization for the system processes on this machine is about 1.5%. By default, EDM will set the y-axis on the left-hand side so that you can see the variability of the data. What I mean by that is our highest and lowest values here are somewhere between 1 and 2.5. As I hover over the different data points, you can see what we call this hover text, the actual value of the metric at a specific time point. So our highest value here looks like it's about 2.6. And our lowest value is, I don't know, it looks like it's over here somewhere around 0.7. If I put the y-axis at a very large range over here on the left-hand side, this would look like a straight line. So it depends on what you're displaying as to how you want EDM to display it. So let me go back and say edit chart. There are chart options, and one of the options is to set the scale. So the scale is linear or logarithmic, but on the y-axis, we can set the upper and lower limit. Auto is what we were just looking at, where we had EDM set the scale based on the values of the metrics. Or we can say, set it somewhere else. And I'll just pick 20 as the top, and we'll put 0 as the bottom. And now I show the chart again, and EDM has now a y-axis from 0 to 20. You can see we still see a little bit of variability in the value of this metric as it goes across the hour that we're displaying, but not as much as we had before. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, the other thing is that we can do a lot of personalization of this chart. So let's go back into the edit chart. You can see we can add a chart title. This is NMIS information. We can put a subcaption. The chart height is not so much an issue with the quick chart, but it is when you're creating a chart to be put into a report. So we may talk about that a little bit later. I'm not going to talk about every single one of these options, but the ones that we see the most often used are that one and the y-axis. The other thing we can do is put a threshold line. So if I want a threshold line, I have to say where I want to put the line, and we'll put this one at 15. We can select the color by clicking here. The default, of course, is just red. And then we're going to click on the little green plus sign to add it into the chart and save it. Now, when I show the chart, you'll see this threshold line at 15. So there is a lot of variability that we can use. And you see, of course, my header is at the top of the chart. There are a lot of different options for the display in terms of the chart type, we have about 20. But let's add in another metric before we start looking at them. So I'm going to edit the chart, and down we still have our metric selection. I'm going to add in maybe a memory metric. So if I say memory % free, either used or free, it doesn't matter. Remember, when there's a green plus icon, you have to use it. Now I've added this metric into my chart. Something a little bit different here. Memory % free does not have a subscript, right? So there is only one value here. So the subscript is doesn't apply, NA, and I'm going to add it into the chart and go back up to the top and say show chart. Okay. Look what happened right here in the middle, because some of the values are higher than 20, where I had told EDM to set the top value. And I can still hover over here. You can see the hover chart's telling me that the CPU is 1.6, but the memory is over 20. So maybe I do want to go back and let EDM set the upper limit. Automatically, I'm still going to keep the y-axis lower limit at 0. Now when I set this, when I display the chart, you can see EDM is doing what I asked and letting me see all of the values for both metrics. Now, I can change the display in a couple of different ways still. For instance, I can make this an area chart where EDM shows me an area. It just really fills in underneath the line from 0 to the top. Now, I can stack them as well, so one is on top of the other. Now, the difference is with an area, they all start at 0. With a stacked area, they're on top of each other. But we have meters. The meter chart is an average across the time range. So our time range is still last hour from 9:34 to 10:34. So we have one value. Our average memory % free is 16.39. Our average CPU utilization across the hour was 1.4. If I wanted to see them in a different, from the y-axis, I can make a column chart. Now, this is a little different. EDM has summarized it in 10-minute intervals. So I see both metrics, but at the 10-minute summary. So a lot of different options. I'm not going to go through every single one, but there are other options such as stacking the columns, stacking the meters, putting them all across from left to right. Okay. What is this stuff at the bottom of the chart? This is called event data. Event data is a special purpose type of information that is only added by default when you are monitoring an operating system instance. So event data is the list of active processes at a given time point. So our chart may cover an hour. We looked at this, 9:34 to 10:30. Now it's 10:30 now because of the summarization. But event data is at one time point. When I'm going to go back to my line view. When I click a specific data point, right? So here it's 9:48. EDM will tell me what was active at 9:48. By default, he gives me the top 5 processes. That is the 5 that are using the most CPU on the system. In this case, because there's not a whole lot running on this system, it is the Sightline. You can see here Sightline DB, the data repository, the database. And this one is DCS, and this one is actually EDM. So these are the processes that are taking the most resources because they're the only things that are running on this system. Now, we can get event data in other data sources, such as OPC or file connections. We just have to configure them to be received specifically. That's all. It's just that they're not a default. So I wanted to point that out before somebody asked. Okay, so this is our chart. We've created a chart. It shows us a couple of different pieces of information. Now, I could say, okay, that looks great. Or I may decide to start over. And so I click New. Now I have to select another data source, right? So that's how we change our minds, I guess you could say. So let's look at one of these packing line data sources. This is the case erector. And if I look at the metric list this time, you can see it's actually fairly short. There are a couple of different metrics, the glue temperature, the humidity, and we always see the collection time, and that's added by EDM, and it basically tells us that we are collecting data and the interval, whether it's 20 seconds or 1 second or whatever. And then we have some equipment status. Sometimes the values, let's look at these equipment status values. Sometimes they're just ones and zeros. Okay, I'm going to go up here and show the chart. And you can see these are just all zeros as I hover across here, right? So maybe that's good, right? So the status down, the stop status, we're not stopped and we're not down. So that's a good thing. Okay, so that's nice, but I don't really need to look at those long term. So I can delete them from the chart just by clicking the delete little red icon, right? Green plus adds them in, red minus takes them out. There's also a check mark to the right. I can leave the metric in the chart, but just say don't display it. We're going to look at this a little bit later because it does, there is a specific purpose for that as well. But let's look at some of the other information. Remember, we had humidity. We can add that in. We had some temperature. We can add that in. And then let's go ahead and show this chart with those couple of metrics. And they're running somewhere around the 70s. And then the glue temperature is running, it looks like between 120 and 130. Very easy to create these charts. But what if I want to go for a longer period of time? What if I want to know what I have been doing for the last week? Remember, it's very easy to go in and select a different time period. So let's say, what was this doing for the last 5 days? We just say, show me the last 5 days and redraw the chart, and EDM shows us what happened over the last 5 days. The time stamp has been updated. And notice when I click on the info icon here, it's telling me that the data is coming from the, our case erector data source, and it's being summarized in this case at 5 minutes. Well, that's because we had to summarize the data in order to display 5 days worth of data in this chart. But we can drill in. For instance, this little section right here has a different shape than the others. So let's take a look at that a little more closely. I think, if you saw it kind of jump there in the middle, that's because EDM was using some it had summarized the data for us, but now we are only asking for a little bit of it from 10:55 to 23:18. So what, 14 hours worth of data? So you can see now he took us back to the 30-second interval so that we can see the actual data itself, the non-summarized data in our report. Okay. So Very easy to get a quick overview of what the report, what the system is actually doing when we just want to have a quick look at one or two metrics. Now, what if I wanted to see data from more than just the one data source? I can add different ones in. Okay, so I have the humidity and the temperature from the case erector. I can add in some data from the case sealer, right? So I just select that data source, and now I've got a slightly different, okay, I still have the status information, but my active metrics are a little bit different, okay? I have some RPMs, conveyor 2, right and left motor, RPMs, right, revolutions per minute. So let's add them in. This doesn't necessarily make sense to put these metrics together, but it's really just for illustration purposes. So now I have information from two different data sources, and I'm going to put it into the same chart. Easy. So I just go ahead. I've got all of my different metrics. You can see the legend is telling me this is called the host ID or the short ID. So the blue metric is the humidity from the case erector. And then over here from the sealer, I have the RPMs for my two motors. And that's going to be the green and the purple metrics down here at the bottom. Now notice we're not really seeing the green metric, even though I can hover over it. That's because those values are so close together that they're kind of hiding each other. So let's drill in a little bit. Again, I don't really see the green line, and that's because the purple line's on top of it. I can hide just by clicking the name in the legend. I can hide the purple metric display so that now you can see exactly what that green left motor was doing, okay, at the same time. Now, I'm going to go ahead over here on the left side and hide the two case sealer metrics. And you can see now EDM will adjust the display so that you can see the details of the metrics that are left. In this case, there's just one. And then add them back in by clicking again on the metric name in the legend. Notice when I had drilled in, EDM had put this little icon in the top right corner, and that's to revert or reset back to the original display, which, if you recall, had been for, I think, last 5 days. Now, I don't have to save this. I'm going to go back and change it to a more last, well, let's go with last 5 minutes. Okay, so it's not going to be a very full chart. I have the last 5 minutes of data, so it's not very interesting. But you still see that the two conveyor motors are running at about the same RPM settings. And I can tell EDM to refresh this chart. Now, the data seems to be coming in around every 30 seconds. So I'll tell EDM just to refresh the chart every 30 seconds. And what that means is I'm still going to get 5 minutes worth of data. I've got 10:41 to 10:46. And if you saw, I've got a pop-up here that's counting down. I'm down at 12, 11, 10 seconds. And EDM will redraw this chart. I'm going to get the newest data on the right, and I'm going to lose a little bit of data on the left, if you just saw it jump, because he redrew it using the most current data. Now, what just happened? I have a little gap here, and I have a little gap here on the right. The reason that this can happen when I'm only looking at 5 minutes worth of data is because the data doesn't always arrive at exactly the same time. this data is being received. You remember that we looked at the file connection settings, and EDM goes out every 20 seconds to check and see if I received a new data file. It is possible that the new data file didn't drop in quite in time to be processed. But you'll see when the next update comes that we are getting new data from the case sealers. It's just not coming in at quite the same interval as the data from the conveyors are not, we're not getting the data quite at the same interval as we were getting it from the other. And that's okay. In general, if you're looking at data at, an hour at a time, you wouldn't see that quite so glaringly as we just did. But the reason we saw the gaps offset is because EDM asked for the last 5 minutes worth of data, and it got 5 minutes worth of data for each of the connections that we're displaying data from. Okay. So questions so far? Okay. Okay, now I have a quick chart, and I may decide that I want to use this chart however it looks, whether I have, let's edit a little bit. We'll say last hour, that doesn't really matter. So we're going to call this Deb's chart. I actually have I go by Debbie, not Deb usually. We're not going to play with the chart height. We're going to let EDM take care of the axis. Let's go ahead and put, gosh, I can't remember what the values were. We can put a threshold line. What were those values on there? We'll just put it at 100 and see if that works. Add it in and save that. And we didn't really have any particular summarization. Remember, we had that 5th metric that we said don't display. It's still there. And we'll show this chart. And we had our threshold right here at 100. I can save this chart. Right now, if I close it, it's gone. But I can save the chart using this menu item here that says Save as Chart. And when I do that, EDM saves the chart. It saves all of the settings that I used, the threshold, everything. So all of this information is saved as a chart setting. Normally, like I said, when I close the quick chart, it would be gone, although kind of saves it. But if I say new, then I really do lose everything. I don't have any metrics assigned anymore. I don't have any chart options or anything like that. We'll talk about these advanced settings probably after lunch. So this was great, but more commonly, what you're going to see is a report. Now, remember I said that a report is comprised of charts and templates. So the chart is right here, a whole list of metrics that are going to be combined. We have all of the settings, and you can see across the bottom here, there are many, many charts that have been created in this instance of EDM. On the left-hand side, I have a view, and a view is really a filter. So it says, just show me the charts that meet a certain bit of criteria. Okay, in this case, they're NMIS that they start with NMIS is the filter, and they have to do with this sample display. We want to look at all charts. Let's go back. And we're going to look for Debbie's chart. They were in alphabetical order. Oh, I just missed it. It was right here. And I can select it, or on the right-hand side, I can edit it. So that's what we're going to do. You can see it tells me it is a line chart right here, and I did set a title. When I edit the chart, basically what I see is the settings that we had already created. The threshold lines, if I click configure, we had added in that threshold line at 100. We have left all of the summarization to the default, and I have 5 metrics assigned to this chart. One of them was not on display. Let's look at a template. Now, a template, well, let's look at a couple of different charts, first of all. With the case sealer, those are a little bit further on. Okay, we had some tricanter that we were looking at before, and we have a bunch of IT-based charts that we have included in the EDM implementation by default. Okay, so these are all of the charts that we have by default. Any other chart that you look at, these from Cook are for an aquaculture example that we were working on. So that would be temperature, water, temperature, things like that. And the ones that we were actually looking for are these IoT air compressor. So these are different charts from the case erector and the air compressor and RPMs that we were looking at before. So we'll just pick one of them. Here's an HVAC chart. So I'm going to click edit, and the air temperature, humidity, air quality are the metrics that we have here. And you can see there's a title. The chart title is HVAC status. Okay, so no particular settings in this chart, but each one references its own metrics to be displayed. Now, what happens when we look at the templates? These templates are, again, combinations of charts, and we have an NMIS overview, and it's this Radio Forge display that we were looking at. If I click edit, a template always has this same combination. So in this case, it's a group of charts, and it just says add these charts in. And these are some scatter charts. We have bar charts, histograms we'll look at. And Adam is joining the call. If you hover over the chart, what you'll see is the list of metrics that's included in the chart. And it'll tell you what type of chart it is. So here we have 3 metrics for power and hammer force, and it's a line chart. Okay, so it's not going to tell you everything, but it is going to give you an overview of what's in there. Okay, of all our report templates, notice they're not individual charts. What they are combinations of charts. And the packing line, once again, if you had watched that demo before I guess it was about a half an hour. I can't remember how long that video was, but it talks about this a little bit as well. So we have shrink wrappers, we had our palletizers and our strappers, and those charts have combinations of metrics from the data sources that we were looking at a minute ago. Once we create the template, we take the template and we create a report. So, for instance, our packing line, here's our strapper RPM. If we edit that template, we've got section. So there's going to be one chart in this section, and that's going to be the width of the report. The next section actually has 5 charts, and that's going to be on one row. So we've got a couple of sections like that. And then again, we have a section, a couple of them, where there's just one chart across the width of the report. So all of this is done within the template itself, okay? And that's why you would have multiple sections in a template. Once we create the template, and to do that, you really just, you grab a chart and drop it into the template. Okay? To get rid of it, you just drag it over on the left-hand side, and there's a drop here to delete. Okay, so adding them in, taking them out is very easy. If we wanted to rearrange, we just do drag and drop, right? So this is, we'll look at this report. So we had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so let's put it back in order. And we can also move them from one section to another, right? So we can easily move the charts once we add them in to get them in the order that we want. So I'm going to cancel out of here just to make sure I don't mess up this template. And let's move on to reports. Okay, a report is going to be based on one chart or one template. To add a report, and actually we'll add one just based on that report that we had looked at, if I can remember. So the report is Debbie's report, and we'll give it the same title. And notice right here, it says, do you want a template or a chart? We're going to base it on the chart. EDM gives you the list of all of the charts that are available, and we can just search for the one that we want. Now, what's going to happen here, though, is that I need to tell EDM which of those data sources to get the data from, right? So hopefully I've got a good memory. I can add them all in and just, hope that I get the ones that I want. So I think we were using the case erector and the case sealer, but I could be wrong. We'll find out. And I'm going to say, give me data from the last hour. So we'll save that chart and see. Oh, we can't have an apostrophe. I forgot about that. And go back to all reports. Here's my report. And let's see how good my memory was. We'll render it. Okay, so I have basically the chart that I had saved, right, was input or into the report definition. And EDM said, okay, great. I'm going to display this report based on what you told me to display. And I'm going to get the data from the 2 data sources that you identified. Now, EDM is pretty smart when it comes to populating the report. If we go back to list and edit this report again, and we had created it and added in the 2 packing line data sources, but I could actually add in another data source, any of these. I'm going to pick this Linux data source. And EDM knows, because he's going to look, when we actually display the report, he'll check, but there are no metrics in that Linux data source that match these metric names. So he just ignores that, right? He checked, but it's not there. So he knows I don't have to do anything with that. From here, we can do a lot with the display. For instance, notice on the right-hand side, there is a little menu. So I can do, I can pop this chart out. I can add threshold lines. I can change the y-axis options like we had talked about before. But let's look at a report that has multiple charts in it. Okay, so let's go back to the list. And in the packing line demo, we had quite a few different reports. And these reports are all based on templates. So we had looked at a couple of different things. Let's look at a really easy one, the shrink wrapper. So I click on the name of the report, the link, and EDM is going to show me what's in that particular report. You can see that we really only had a couple of different metrics being displayed. There is some stuff going on under the covers here in terms of creating batches, but we'll look at that, like I said, again this afternoon. And what this report is telling us is that the warp average is different, based on whether it's a particular batch or a particular operator. And that's additional data that we added in. But from here, I can pop out the report if I wanted to look at it a little more closely. Let me see if I can find one that's a line view, because that's actually a little bit easier to play with. This one is, again, about the Linux system. Okay, if I pop out the chart, it's one of the options in the chart menu, then I can manipulate this chart without changing the report. And so I can change, maybe I want to see what it looks like as an area view, or maybe I want to see what it looks like. Here's a high view, right? So we've got a lot of different display options. Let me change that back to, we'll do a column. So he's going to give me, again, summarizing by 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, the average value for each of my 4 metrics. But also, I can hide the legend, for instance. I can look at statistics. So the statistics take each metric and show me the average, minimum, maximum, and sum of all of the data across the time range of the report. So there's a lot I can do with just one chart. And the reason I popped it out is because I want to maybe look at it a little more closely without having to manipulate the chart in the report itself, because I don't want to make any changes there. Okay. So let's go back to list and find a report that actually gives us a little bit more information. I don't remember if there's any data behind this one or not, but we'll give it a try. No, it's got a little bit, but not much. So let's pick a different one. We'll pick the air compressors. Strapper RPM. I like that. I think there's more, there are more charts in this one. There we go. This, I was looking for one with a line chart in it. So when I have a line chart, like here, the strapper, we had looked at these two. We have 2 conveyors. We have the motor RPM for the left motor and the right motor. And we had seen this a little bit. What I can do, again, is pop it out, or I can drill in. This is showing me data for the last week. And I might want to look at just a shorter period of time. Something else I can do, though, is I can pop out the report report and put it into another tab. What that does for me is it allows me to go back and do other things in the EDM interface, because now I have not just reports, but I can go back now and change templates, I can create new charts, etc. And in the meantime, this strapper report is out there in a different tab, and I can set the refresh rate. Maybe I want to refresh every minute. And that is a totally separate implementation or display is a better word. It's a separate display, and EDM is going to support both of them. Again, I can even go back and display another report. So here's the shrink wrapper report, and I can pop that out at the same time. So now I have a couple of different reports, both being maintained by EDM, and I can set a refresh rate for this one as well. I'll set that one for a minute. Notice when you pop out a report, it gives me a little bit of an option for the display. I can change the time that's being displayed here. I can change the reference time. So for instance, if I wanted to see yesterday, the 8 hours of yesterday, I can change the end time to maybe 1700 hours, 1700. And let's say yesterday was the 15th. And now what EDM is going to do is he's going to start on the 15th at 5 o'clock, 1700 hours, and show me the 8 hours before that. And so I'm going to apply that. And now EDM is going to redraw the chart based on that time period. Now, if I'm not careful and I don't know what the settings are, it may not be exactly what I thought I was going to get. But EDM will populate the report based on what you asked for. Now, when you have a refresh rate and you specify a custom time, it may not get a refresh the way you wanted it to be. But EDM allows you to play, make changes, and do what you want to do based on what you think you want to see. Okay, and we can store this. We can do whatever we want with this one. Let's go back and look at our other chart, which has been updated. So we've got a couple of newer data points over here on the right-hand side. But again, we're looking at the last 7 days of data. You can do a couple of things with this display, but one in particular I want to make sure that I mentioned was this. Notice that each report has its own URL. So in the database where this configuration for the report is stored, it's got its report ID, and that's in the URL. I can copy this URL, and what I'm going to do is open another browser. So here's Edge. Put that URL into the browser, and I can display that report from someplace else. Now, the easiest way is to add this tag that says and login equals false. And so I'm going to put in that URL, and EDM is going to populate that report for me. What that means is you can send the URL for the display to anybody who can actually access this server. And they can open a browser and just display this report without logging into EDM. So you don't have to give them a user ID, and you can let them see the data. They can do, they can drill in, they can change the time, they can pop out the report, for instance, pop out this chart, okay? But they can't actually make changes in the EDM system. This is a really powerful feature because it allows you to share the data without giving access to the EDM itself to all of these different people. And we do have a lot of users that use this feature for making data available to management, for instance. Okay, so the login equals false means that they can display the report without having to log into EDM. And again, you don't have to make them a registered user in the interface. Okay, so that's what some of our users call that the no login link. And they use that for a lot of management reporting, a lot of just monitoring the system, but without having to do all of the prep steps, right, themselves. So questions again. Okay, want to make sure I keep stopping, right? Another thing you can do with this report, and these are a couple things I want to mention so that I don't forget. In EDM, we talked about schedules, and we had we have 5 default schedules here. We can edit one or we can add one ourselves. So we'll just add one. And I have it's almost 11:30, so we'll call it 11:30 every day. And you can see we can do a monthly schedule, something that happens like the 1st or the 5th day of the month. But we're just going to go ahead and say 11:30 and save it. So now I have a schedule. If I go back to one of my reports, we'll use Debbie's report. At the bottom of the report configuration, there's an option that says run on schedule. So we select the schedule, and you can see this little eyeball icon will tell you what the details of the schedule are. You can't change it, but you can see it. You can also add a brand new schedule, but we already had one. I'm going to say print this report to a PDF and use the landscape mode. And EDM will do that at 11:30 every day and save it. Now, I can also ask EDM to attach this PDF to a report, attach the PDF to an email and then send that report off to anybody that I specify. Okay, we do not have an email server configured in this instance of EDM, but it's really this easy. So I would, send to email. So this is my email address, right? Email at whatever. And the subject would be Debbie's Daily Report. And I would configure that only once, and I would start getting this report every day. But for right now, okay, I said to print it to PDF, and I'm going to save this report. And we'll wait at 11:30. It's actually going to get saved. The nice thing about that is that you can say last full day. Actually, why don't we do that? We'll say that I want to change the time frame. Instead of last hour, I'm going to say, show me last full day. And that's last full week. Last full day, and save it. Okay, and I'm done. So EDM is going to take care of that for me every day at 11:30 and create that PDF. Okay, questions? Okay. We have people in different time zones. I wanted to take a little bit longer break this time, maybe a half hour, and then come back and do a little more information about the reports, the schedules, and then talk about expressions and views this afternoon. So let's take, I have 11:30. So let's take a break for, I don't know, a half an hour, and then we'll pick up and spend a couple more hours and see where we end up. I just want to get through all of the visualization and talk a little bit about, the different options that we can use. So we're good?
Okay,
All right.
perfect. Mhm.
All right. We'll pick up in actually 35 minutes.
Yes.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you,
So
Deb.
Mhm.